Hello, I am C3PO, and I believe the storyteller is ready. So let us begin.
This week, the story is about a visual world, largely first brought to life by a production designer named John Barry, who cut his teeth in the biz working with legends like Liz Taylor on Cleopatra, Clint Eastwood movies, before being hired by Stanley Kubrick to run the set design for A Clockwork Orange. And shortly after that, he does The Little Prince, Superman, and then Star Wars: A New Hope, for which he won the Academy Award for Art Direction. He set uh, he set a practical but realistic visual tone that, of course, has been repurposed and adapted and built upon in every successful installment of the franchise subsequently. But it was only 2 weeks into work on Empire Strikes Back when John Barry collapsed and died at the age of 44. This week, we're counting down our top 6 favorite sets and sceneries in all of Star Wars. Ross, how important is this visual element in establishing what Star Wars feels like and what it means to fans?
It's huge, and it's something that's really interesting for us specifically. Like, we grew up with an original six almost, and that is very different from the way most people have viewed Star Wars. And there is a very big aesthetic shift between the original trilogy and the prequels. But the way that I'm able to view the galaxy as one and a whole really allows that to make a lot of sense for me, and then thus Star Wars does have this very dynamic but very clear visual presence. You're able to tell, okay, no, that is clearly Star Wars, and whether that is a planet where the ground is blue and there's gigantic mushrooms, or whether it's a geometric shaped hallway inside of a starship, it doesn't matter. Both have such a clear Star Wars feel to them, or whether it's a desert world or a snowy world, but you can still tell the difference between, okay, this is shot in a Star Warsy way using the actual world around you, but with different kind of modifications. And then also ones that are a little bit more grounded in reality. And so there are some certain worlds in Star Wars that maybe don't work, and some certain set designs that don't work. But for the most part, Star Wars has shown such a broad range that it allows for a lot of creativity in how you're going to set a scene. And the scene design is usually just very reflective of what you're trying to show in that scene. It's very metaphorical, the scenery around you. And that is what is consistent within Star Wars, as opposed to having a consistent, always tone per se.
Yeah, and I really wanted to touch on, in that intro, I wanted to touch on, of course, John Barry's commitment to the practical effects that kind of make Star Wars initially iconic. And part of that's budgetary, but the budget or the lack thereof back in '76 allows for them to get creative in ways that almost like the big studio movies are never painted into that corner anymore. Certainly not Disney and Star Wars. They have all the money they could ever need, and they have creativity on their side as well. But uh, just innovatively, is that a word? Star Wars totally broke new ground. Although I think, and I haven't seen A Clockwork Orange, but I suspect that's probably a good training ground for something so literally out of this world as is Star Wars.
Yeah. And it really is. It's so out of this world, but it's also grounded a little bit in reality. Yes, it's a twin sunset, but it's still a sunset. And that's kind of and it may be Luke Skywalker, like moisture farmer, but it's still Luke Skywalker, or better yet, it's still Luke the farmer.
Right.
And so it's that beautiful blend of you only have to suspend disbelief on one key element, and it is a very fantastical thing that you're suspending disbelief on, which is a wonderful thing. But then it allows you to be kind of vicariously part of the story, and that's of course what's so wonderful about Star Wars and that lived-in galaxy that is such a great way to describe the way we feel when we enter A New Hope. 3PO having the silver leg is a great example of that. It's something that a lot of people don't notice for such a long time, because it's just inherently grungy, and that feels right because it fits within the scene design.
It's a great example. I had a C3PO action figure as a kid, and I don't know that it was specifically from any particular Star Wars, but I think it was probably an original trilogy action figure, and he definitely did not have a silver leg. And so I don't know if that's just like an oversight on the toy company, although a lot of involvement from Lucasfilm in the toy company, and so that seems kind of unlikely. But I guess
It's
just
not
considered
entirely.
like it's not considered like a really critical detail of the character, I guess.
No, exactly. And it's tarnished as well. And it's only, I think, silver from the knee down. And so with that in mind, like even like a Lego 3PO, Lego 3PO has always just had
Right.
legs that match. And it's fine. It's not like the red arm in The Force Awakens that's so in your face, Mr. Solo.
So before we get started, I regret to tell you that your audio is not great. You're like
Really?
way lower than normal. I'm not sure if your microphone's not plugged in, but you kind of sound like you're just using a laptop microphone. I
How
lost
about
you.
now? Is it better?
Yep.
Is it a little better now?
Well, I'll have to hear you talk for a long period of time for sure, but I hope so. You just seem
Is it better now?
Yeah,
Or
you're definitely clearer now. Yeah.
are there any issues?
I don't.
I'm clear now. That's good.
You're
I'm
clearer
glad.
now. I don't think my
Maybe
bigger concern was
move my
the
microphone
volume.
a little
So, like,
closer.
yeah, that's good. I like it. Just
Yeah.
my biggest concern is I'm looking at the levels before, and I'm way louder than you, and I shouldn't be on the settings we're using. So this should do the trick.
Okay. Well, we're only a couple minutes in, so it's good we got it adjusted. All right. Well, we can
Okay,
dive right
so
in.
yeah, without further ado, I think you're going to go first. This is your sixth favorite. We don't need to waste a lot of time discussing what we
No.
think sets or scene pieces are. Like, I mean, obviously that's pretty clear, but like we're going to have different interpretations like always. What is your sixth favorite Star Wars set or scenery?
The number 6 for me would be Tipoca City, and so that would be where the cloners on Camino live and create their entire Jango Fett army. And it is such an interesting and very it's such a polarizing place. It's this harsh environment with this incredibly like vile weather around it, and it's this rough sea, but it is like built on stilts, and it's stark white inside and so incredibly clean. And you have these intimidating, tall but thin Kaminoans, and then you have this kind of like library with just clones upon clones, and the quarters that Jango Fett has, where it has the sliding door. It's just so clean. It is what you imagine when you picture even Tatooine and the way that Mos Eisley is. The entire area, the way that the doors are set up, there's a unique Star Wars feel to it, and you can see an evolution of almost like the most sci-fi brand new innovative way that the Kaminoans have designed it to almost like the grungier over time development of what it would become in the rest of the galaxy to what we're super familiar with. And because it's this area that's not really known, and Obi-Wan's it's a mystery. So the fact that it is so clean and seems so well put together with like a strong political system, it's got mystery wrapped up around the atmosphere and the scene that you're in. And Obi-Wan doesn't know what's going on, and we don't know what's going on. It's a really cool environment, and we visit it back in the Clone Wars. I can guarantee you we'll get more in the Bad Batch. I think this was a home run in Attack of the Clones.
I think it's also just really clever. It's just good story making that they've decided. Well, this is a culture that their main purpose in the story is that they are working on this innovative technology, and it's secretive. So we got to find some way to sequester them in a corner of the galaxy we're not familiar with. And what better place to do that than in a place where, for as much as we know, there is no organic living space. And so, like, I actually think in a way it's entirely different from Mos Eisley, because you look at the structures and the buildings that the city are made of, and you can see how it's organic. You can see that Tatooine, even Naboo, which looks a little bit more like Earth, frankly, but like it's built of the Earth with varying degrees of crudeness and sophistication, where the sophistication of this city is completely otherworldly, because it's completely unorganic. It's built of their technology and their advancement. Now, throw in the fact that it's just like this big ocean, and like you said, it's quite ominous. I love that it's raining when we're outside, and then the interior of the city is really cool. It's something I didn't put on my list, but I did list it in my honorable mentions. Is Gungan City for similar reasons? It's just like how did an imagination come up with this? It's totally otherworldly.
Yeah, Otagunga is like a prime honorable mention for me. I had that one as a just that's a really phenomenal set design. The I think the Camino and is similar, but just done to an even maybe more creative way. And the Kaminoans are way cooler than the Gungans. So it's although Tarpals is pretty great, but it just in general, I think it's done extremely well. And like you said, it's very tech driven, but it shows such a range for the galaxy. It's like it's the height of heights, but it's like you said, it's also so secretive, and it's a population that has done this to survive. That's something that in like the Kaminoans needed to learn how to clone to survive as a population. So,
and there's something incredibly fluorescent about the interior of it, which I think is kind of classic sci-fi. Like you're in the alien base now, you wake up underneath like a big spotlight and you're like, what are you poking in me? Like they're not specifically doing that to Obi-Wan, but like it's like you said, there's something kind of eerie about this place. And I think they totally nail it. Very good.
yeah.
So my sixth favorite is a little bit more classic than that. My sixth favorite is the trash compactor. This is a scene that we talked about last week briefly. It hasn't been discussed on this podcast too much, at least not since we were doing our first season of the podcast. Mainly, I like it because it's so singular. It never really is revisited so effectively. It does stand out as one of the most iconic original Star Wars scenes. Obviously, it's like most often referenced pop culturally, and the tone of like a potentially dangerous creature lurking in the darkness. That's kind of a franchise staple. We've kind of touched on that a little bit, but that's not even really what makes this scene work so well. It's seeing your heroes like narrowly avoid getting squashed in this constricting metal room. It kind of changes your brain, I think, when you see this as a kid. Like suddenly you become aware that like, what if rooms could enclose? How terrifying that would be.
Yeah.
And the water and the foam cheap rubber. It's got this like charming
3PO. Oh, where could he be?
It's like a real charming cheapness to that scene in terms of practical design. Again, it's so iconic, and so I had to acknowledge the trash compactor.
Great choice. Never would have thought to put it on my list. I think I wasn't thinking that granular. When I would have think of something so imperial, I didn't really. I never could barrow it down to something so specific as the trash compactor like that. And there are a couple other ones, but no, I think that's a fantastic one. I love this scene. You're right. It's something that's so Star Wars, but almost really hasn't been replicated or even revisited in the same possible way. I do want another great creature from the Black Lagoon moment.
Yeah.
And I think that we haven't had one since then. And I think that we're long overdue for one of those kind of key moments with like maybe with like something else going on in a similar kind of capacity to like obviously the walls closing in.
Well,
And I think it was kind of cool with episode 11 or chapter 11 of Mando when there was when they were on the Quarren ship and like Din was in the water, but Grogu was in the cage inside the sea monster, and it was similar kind of stakes, but not quite the same, but definitely stake wise gave me a similar sort of vibe.
No, and I think we've had other similar Creature from the Black Lagoon installments where they've tried to do it, just not, it hasn't been replicated so effectively. And I think the difference is that in this case, in the trash compactor, it's like the fact that there's like something slithering by Luke's leg is not even the primary concern of the scene. It just happens to be like making things more complicated. But there's the situation with the weird, like, you'd know what they're called and you should tell me what they're called. The weird, like, bats where they have to like actually exit the Falcon to figure out what they are. I think that's
in Empire.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying is like there are later things in Star Wars where, and there's like, there's always a bigger fish. Other cases where there happens to be a monster emerging from the darkness, but usually it's the main threat of the moment and not like the fact that walls are closing in. And do you know exactly how they achieved that in terms of special effects? Is it just camera angles? Do they have a hydraulic wall that's on like a track or anything?
I don't know. I'm guessing it was probably some form of hydraulic track. That would be my guess. Yeah.
Maybe. What are the name of those bat creatures? Do you know?
Um, oh, the ones inside the Exogorth. I'm blanking in a really bad way. I've had a couple glasses of wine. Um,
I can
oh my
picture.
God, this is killing me.
I can
This is
picture them to the
awful.
extent that you're able to picture them at all because they deliberately don't really show them directly. But
Oh my God, this is awful though. What are they called?
somebody's screaming at their phone.
I'm screaming at my phone.
It'll come to you later on. This is your number 5, your 5th favorite scene or set design in Star Wars.
I'm still so deeply distraught. My number 5 is Bright Tree Village.
Oh, man.
Absolutely adore Bright Tree Village. It's such a cool with like the bridges that are connecting these little huts and the way that they zoom out. It's a really, really phenomenal design for everything. It's happy-go-lucky, but also we know that the Ewoks are at the same time insane. They try and eat our heroes at the start, and then there's a bunch of like stormtrooper head bongos going throughout. It's really a cool design, and just Endor in general is cool, but it's still a little Earth-like. But the way that they have these elevated kind of village area, and it's the happy end of everything. I think it's a really cool set design, and I've always wanted to see more things happen on a set like that.
Yeah, and I think it also really speaks to the lover of tree forts in just about any kid. I mean, a lot has been said
Yeah,
about how the Ewoks are brought in to appease the really younger child viewers, and obviously George has always had an inclination towards making the young kid viewers enjoy themselves as well. And Ewoks are a path towards that. And I mean, like you just look at this network of little paths and pedways, and it's pretty sweet. Like it's pretty cool. I don't really have a whole lot more to say about it because it is a forest, and I think they use what is it, the redwoods in San Francisco or something to create
exactly what they use. Yeah.
Endor. And I mean, it looks so cool. There's a scene in Parks and Recreation where they find themselves in those woods, and Adam Scott's character is like really psyched because he's a bit of a Star Wars nerd. And
Oh, I
when you
don't
see
remember
them,
that episode.
yeah, it's later in the series. But when you see them, you're like, oh, it is Endor. I never realized it before, but like I actually recognize the redwoods from Return of the Jedi, not from like nature. I wonder if you're like if you would walk in that park as a citizen of San Francisco and feel that way, or if it's just or if everybody feels that way. They're just so intrinsically attached, the aesthetic of those trees.
Well, that was a big thing for chapter. Was it chapter 15 or chapter 14 of this past season of Mando? I don't remember. The Tragedy, whichever one that was Robert Rodriguez did.
Yeah.
And so that was one that a lot of people, because it's just in it's in California. It was the only thing in Mando that was not shot on the volume, and a bunch of people drove out there, and people had shots from it. They thought it was a fan film.
If I can make you feel any better, I'm not sure there is a canonical name for these space slugs that appear in the Exogorth. I'm looking it
No,
up.
I'm 100% sure there is. I'm 100% sure there is, and it is. I am so angry with myself. The only reason why I can't get this is because I can't get the word moth out of my fucking mind, and it's driving me nuts.
Well,
But no, there 100% is a name.
are they called Sio?
Nope.
Well, I don't know what to tell you then, bud. I just keep looking up Exogorth, and there's lots of stuff on the Exogorth.
Yeah, I can't believe this. This is so bad.
Okay, well, let me distract you. Speaking of creepy crawlies, my 5th favorite set or scenery is the Dagobah Swamp. I actually think we're overall a little bit deprived of more Dagobah in Star Wars. I guess that's intentional. The entire exposure we get really feels very interior. It feels like it was filmed on a soundstage, which it probably was. And I think that represents Yoda as well, intentionally. The size of him personally, the isolation in which he lives. It's supposed to feel insular and small, but purely like the aesthetic of the Dagobah Swamp, where Luke and R2 land. It's
Amphibious.
phenomenally. It is amphibious, but it's also curious without being kind of haunting. Like you're never actually like nervous for what might happen here, but you're like it's a little wonderlandy. in a grungy kind of way, but it serves as the stage for
Minox.
Minox. There you go. You did it. I knew you'd do it.
Oh my God.
It was an M. It was an M
Well,
word.
that was my problem, though. I couldn't get off of it. I'm still so deeply embarrassed, though. I'm annoyed with myself, but still, I'm glad I got it. Jesus Christ.
May I continue? Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's right. Of course, the Dagobah Swamp is where the iconic raising of the X-Wing fighter happens. Again, practical movie making. I guess I'm going to be hung up on like how they actually like do the bells and whistles of Star Wars a lot when we talk about this conversation tonight. And by the way, like Yoda is a practical effect in his original form. He's a Muppet. Muppets and their world, and now I'm talking about like Kermit and Fozzie. They feel 100% real. They're like celebrities themselves because, practically speaking, they are. And Dagobah is that too. It feels very much like a real world kind of place, and yet mystical things can happen there. And so I like the wonder and the promise of Dagobah.
Yeah, Dagobah it's dark, but at the same time, it's filled with so much life. Everything is creepy and crawling, and so it's alive, and that's very much with the Force. And so it's it's a dark side nexus, and Octo is a light side nexus, or even just a Force nexus, I guess, more likely. But it's interesting, the similarities as well as to where Luke hides himself and where Yoda hides himself. But it's an important part. It's a place for Luke to learn. Is there a specific spot on Dagobah that you like, whether it was like Yoda's hut or like the dark side cave, or like right as Luke is exiting like the X-Wing and he's like just gotten to like the swamp's shore?
I do namely mean the swamp and like where the X-Wing situation happens, like really our
Yeah.
initial Dagobah. Although now that you mentioned Yoda's hut, like sure, it kind of looks like a moldy version of Bag End. Like it's just this
Yeah.
little dumpy thing, and then when the light is on in the window, and of course, I mean, I like it all. I think it's anytime you're on Dagobah, you're happy because you're getting some classic Yoda, and yeah, I like all of it, but in particular the swamp.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great choice.
Okay, your turn. Number 4 already.
Yeah, we're moving at a good pace. My number 4 would be the Death Star's 2 Observatory Tower, throne room of Emperor Palpatine.
Nice.
Observatory Tower, I should say. And this is the final battle between Anakin / Vader, Luke, and Palpatine. And it has a lot of the Star Wars elite elements. It's got pits that are bottomless with a bunch of technology and reactors at the bottom of them. It's barren, but also has scaffolding at the same time. It's ominous, but it has also these giant windows. It's an observatory, so it's a place of knowledge. It's almost like it's taking place in a library, but also like the king's office. It's a very weird place, but because the emperor is so inherently evil, it still feels like such an evil place. But you have these observatory terminals, and you have Luke being able to kind of hide in the shadows, and the elevator that brings them up. It's just a very, very cool set design, and ultimately for one of the greatest moments in Star Wars. And it definitely holds its own to be the backdrop of said scene.
I love it too. I never really thought about how strange it is that they've kind of departed Palpatine from the pomp and circumstance, like the glamour of having an office. And I guess he's got bigger fish to fry, but he, at the end of the day, is still pretty egotistical, even as the emperor. And so it is kind of funny that like he has this kind of shut away office without any red carpets or gold curtains or really a whole lot of I guess just like adornment that feeds his ego. You're right. It feels like a practical room, almost like a warehouse type room where like, the mechanic would go to change the light bulb.
Yeah, no, I think that's the big thing, is that Palpatine has gotten to this point in his life where he has he has the image that he projects to the galaxy, but he almost doesn't really give a fuck about that anymore. He's
Right.
conquered the political world. He's dissolved the Senate. He's done everything that he wants. So he is completely in charge, and now he is just so obsessed with finding Sith lore and conquering that world that he is a little bit just more on the pragmatic side, and he is less of a human and has installed figureheads and still projects himself in hollows, not looking like a shriveled old, like lurching man. He presents himself as the way Sheev looked before he got electrocuted. He presents himself that way in the hollows, even though he did still announce that he was disfigured by Mace Windu. And then after that, he was never really viewed in public again.
Right.
And so it allowed him to be like, he didn't need to show the pomp and circumstance because he had already just won. And so his pomp and circumstance were things like the Death Star. And so it was more of he got off on the intimidation as opposed to the classiness of it. He didn't even need to be classy. He was too into being evil.
Yeah, I mean the Death Star is a pretty big dick swing, to be fair.
It really is. It's not anything other than like, yeah, and also putting the galaxy in its place. That was the whole point. It was a giant fear-mongering device. We'll blow up the couple planets that cause us trouble, and then there won't be any more planets that cause us trouble. Period.
Mhm.
We'll blow up Alderaan. We might have to do Chandrilla, maybe a couple other peaceful worlds, maybe Mon Cal, something like that. Nothing too big, just a couple worlds. Jeddah, we already tested the shit on that, so it's gone. Maybe we'll blow up Ilum, or maybe, you know what, let's just harvest Ilum and build an even bigger weapon. We'll call it Star Killer Base.
And it can't travel.
Yeah, but it can shoot things across the entire galaxy and blow up entire systems.
So my fourth favorite set, I guess it's a singular set, is Echo Base, man. I won't belabor this because I know we talked about Hoth a lot lately, me in particular. I don't have any hot takes on Hoth. We all like Hoth. In general, I think this planet, this entire first act of Empire Strikes Back, is a brilliant device for story progress and showing galactic diversity, because we've seen like a little bit of interplanetary stuff in the first movie, although actually very little when you actually think about it. Hoth stands to tell you ain't seen nothing yet. Check out how desolate and weird this place is. The construction of this huge and sophisticated rebel base kind of shows you that the good guys are maybe a little bit more elite and sophisticated than you realize in episode 4. They're much more ragtag in episode 4, and by now they're starting to get their shit together. Still small, but a little bit more well organized. And from a personal standpoint, I think all the tunnels, and the tunnels are my favorite part, they're what remind me of the tunnels we would dig in the big snowbanks that we lived in a corner lot. And so the snowplow would take a huge street's worth of snow and dump it on the end of our yard. And then we'd be able to dig these enormous tunnels in the snow. And those are some of my favorite childhood outdoor memories. And so playing in the snow as a Star Wars fan is, I mean, immediately then it becomes a game of Hoth. And so those tunnels in particular feels like really grassroots, and it kind of takes me back to childhood. So Echo Base, man.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're hitting a bunch of the ones that I don't have on my list, but want that are like huge honorable mentions. And yeah, that's a phenomenal one. The shape of the hallways, the rounded. This is a snow fort of it all is fantastic. The giant ice garage where like the hangar that they're in, when they have to close like the giant doors, and it's fantastic. I absolutely love Echo Base. And it felt like and they have like the computer lab almost. It just, when I was relating to like the rooms, it just seemed so logical, and as if like if I had to design a base as a 5-year-old, like I could design Echo Base.
It's a little Batcavey in that way.
Yeah, kind of, but not in a bad way at all. And it's I love Hoth, and I think it. We've mentioned many times before the affinity that we have for Hoth as Canadians because of the snow and just the general love that we have with that. But I think this is a great one. The entire atmosphere and the scenes that, and like you said before, like the Han and Leia scenes that take place there. like having like steamy scenes in a chilly environment. You gotta have that nice contrast there. So
What can you tell me about Echo Base historically? Like it kind of presents itself as a bit of a pop-up base, although it also seems like pretty supplanted by the beginning of Empire Strikes Back. It seems like they've got some roots here. So how long have our rebel heroes been there at the beginning of Empire Strikes Back, and how long have the rebels in general been on Hoth?
And so at most, I'm not exactly sure within the comics, but it's at most about a year. They've been bouncing around a bit, and this is one of the first ones that they've been able to find some good roots on. And of course, it doesn't last, but they've been there longer than they've been anywhere else. But they've been kind of bouncing around trying to find a good place to hide, and the Hoth system has made for a good spot to hide. Luke and Vader have encountered one another. That's like they're like a lot of people don't like that, and I don't read a bunch of the comics, but a lot of people aren't a fan of the notion that Luke and Vader encounter one another before Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, that's
Um,
that they would
it
keep it.
does seem weird, but at this in specific time, Vader is very gung ho about finding him because he wants to know who the pilot is who blew up the Death Star. Because he also could tell he was strong in the Force. And so Boba Fett finds out that his name is Skywalker. That's all you can find out. And of course, that's all Vader needs to hear. And so then Vader becomes deeply obsessed, and then they go on the real hunt. And at the start of Empire Strikes Back, Vader, like they say, oh yeah, it's probably nothing on Hoth, and Vader's like, nope, it's on, they're on Hoth, and Skywalker is with them, and it's because of the Force that they're caught there, and that's once again Luke unknowingly exposing the rebellion, like he does
I
again
mean,
on Endor.
I didn't know that when they meet in Empire Strikes Back, that's not canonically their first meeting anymore, and I do hate that. I think that
Yeah,
yeah, that
yeah,
seems
I'm not a huge fan of it, and it's not like it's not a big meeting, but it's like it was a while ago, and I only read like the comic summaries to like get the general like gist of what a comic arc has occurred. I've read a couple of the comic arcs, but not many of them, just a couple of the Vader ones, a couple of the Kanan ones. But it it was a little bit, it was kind of, it wasn't like a full-on meeting, but it was maybe a little bit more than Luke screaming no in A New Hope and Vader seeing him across the room while he steps on Obi-Wan's cloak
right.
confusedly. But I don't quite remember exactly what it was. It wasn't a whole lot. But then, of course, I'm looking here at my wall, and you got me a couple of framed comics, and there's one that's like a really old one, and it says Star Wars in Mortal Kombat, and it's an early issue, and it takes place right after Empire Strikes Back. Sorry, right after A New Hope, and it's Luke facing Vader on the cover. So in Legends and in everything, they've always inserted different sort of things like that. But if you just watch the movies, you can view it however you like.
Right, right. Okay, it's time for your top three. What's your third favorite Star Wars set piece?
My third favorite one was a tough one. I had to bump it down from 2 to 3 because it wasn't a solo set piece. It is, but it's one set design in two different films, and it's completely different. But I almost prefer it second instance, and it would be Vader's Castle. And so I really, really wish that they explored it more in Rise of Skywalker, because I almost prefer that set design in the very opening scene. In my opinion, the first 5 minutes of Rise of Skywalker are the best minutes of the movie. I think it's absolutely bloody incredible. I just wish it was longer, because it's so interesting that they're on Mustafar, and that is where he's found the Wayfinder, and it's in the ruins of Vader's castle, and that Mustafar has regrown. And then when we see Vader's castle in Rogue One, and we have this, it's built over top of where he fell, and it's so menacing and cold, but built on a lava planet, and it has catacombs that have been explored through video games, and it is deeply, deeply lore driven. Mustafar is a very cool planet in that regard, and it has Vader's kind of like Bacta rooms and whatnot. It's so over the top.
Yeah.
It's so science fiction-y, Dracula's castle, Frankenstein's lair. It's super villainous and extreme,
It is.
but worthy of Darth Vader to the most full extent. And it is a painful, pathetic place, filled with sadness. But I think it is so meaningful to Star Wars and was introduced so late into Star Wars. And I think that's even so interesting. The fact that its first appearance before Vader's castle was even built is in Revenge of the Sith, and its first appearance is in Rogue One as a castle, and then its next appearance is in Rise of Skywalker as ruins, which ultimately is the one that I think is the most interesting. I think that that's just a really cool progression that can be tied with an important character, that has also had, we've seen him from his base level, his absolute nothing, just a child, to his fullest and most powerful, to his life in ruins.
Okay, that's very interesting. I don't have a relationship to uh Vader's castle in particular. I guess I thought it was very cool. Obviously, I'm excited to see Vader when he appears in Rogue One. And also, I mean, I love the whole Mustafar sequence. We've talked about that, maybe more than anything. And in general, I'm kind of always a fan of the lava set piece. I'm a fan of Mount Doom. I'm a fan of Goron City. Like I like that kind of aesthetic. And you're right, it's very super villainy. And why shouldn't the greatest supervillain of all time not have like an essential supervillain palace castle? My only issue with it is that and you said it was introduced so late. I was able to go my entire life as a Star Wars fan without ever having a problem with Vader just living on the Death Star or in a Star Destroyer and just being, frankly, for the lack of a better word, a workaholic, because I think it actually kind of works really well with Vader that he is without purpose, if not to rule the Empire and to be obsessively on the job, so to speak. And so, while I think Vader's castle is very cool, part of me kind of struggles with the idea that he would even want a place to like put his slippers on and let his hair down.
That's
It's
the thing. It's the opposite of that for him.
okay.
It's the exact opposite. It's not a place for him to go and recharge and relax. It's a place for him to go and recharge his hatred.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
a place for him to go and feel more pain.
like in a forced
It's Yeah, absolutely. It is his fortress of solitude. It is a place. Darth Vader is a prisoner, and the great line from Cassian, from Chirrut to Cassian, that different people have prisons. I sent you, carry yours everywhere you go, Captain. And that is Darth Vader, 100%. Darth Vader is in prison constantly, and when he's going to be alone, and even like all he has is his thoughts to himself, he doesn't have the job to distract him, then all he gets to do is to torture himself constantly.
I
He gets
see.
to remind himself, oh yeah, you killed your wife,
Mm.
and you killed your unborn child, and you lost to your master, who was jealous of you. Yeah, he was jealous of you. And so were all the other Jedi. But then you still lost, you pathetic loser, as he looks out the window as to where he burned, and basically burned alive, and should have died, but was only alive because he was just so bloody angry. And the dark side of the Force was what keeps him alive. And so that's really the great psychology behind Darth Vader's suit, and how Vader's castle is just another version of his suit. It's like it's a suit for his suit
Right.
almost. It's a place for him to go and really amp up the hatred, and just focus on hating himself a little bit more.
I picture him like uh writing angry poems in his diary and like
Mhm.
blaring welcome to the Black Parade and saying things like it's not just a phase, Dad.
Yeah, and you just like absolutely just scooping up sand, and just like with the Force, and just destroying or turning it into glass and being like, "Ha! You are now useful to me."
That would be such a funny Anakin like side characteristic if he repurposes glass. He
Just
blows
finally getting his
glass as
way.
a hobby. He finally learned to love sand. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so my third, I mean, it's maybe the most iconic. It's definitely one of the most iconic sets in all of Star Wars, and it's the
I,
Millennium Falcon cockpit.
Okay, nice. Another one of my honorable mentions.
Not going to appear on your list. You're crazy. So
No, and it's a phenomenal one. I'll let you talk about it first, but it was one that I didn't. It was not the first way I identified it, even though it 100% is scene design, it 100% is set design.
yeah.
It's just not the way I identified it. And I was like, you know what? I'm okay with not putting it in my list because it's just not how I initially viewed it. But of course, it's a phenomenal top one.
Well, yes, and I did kind of have to think about it a little bit differently than the others because it's not a set piece that so badly needs to evoke certain feelings or tones to propel the story. It just has to be cool because it's going to be in like most Star Wars movies forever. And you can do a lot, I think, with any fake cockpit of a fake aircraft to like dress it up and make it look realistic in a movie, especially a sci-fi movie. You can add like blinking colorful lights and switches and buttons or whatever. And the Falcon's got all of those, of course, in spades. But purely like superficially, just to look at it and remove all of your like sentimentality. The pièce de résistance, I think, of this design is this giant circular windshield, and the fact that the four flight chairs, like those deck chairs, are in this cylindrical appendage of the spaceship itself that kind of like reaches off the disc of the Falcon. And I think that design is just so creative. And so I love the shape of it, and in particular the nose of that window. And so other than that, like classic, because it does kind of have a bit of like a classic dash cam vibe.
It's awesome.
It's like a Knight Rider kind of thing. Like we just have a camera on the dashboard of our car and we're going on a road trip, except it's a spaceship. Other than that, it's not that innovative of a set, I guess. But if you think about all that happens here, it's an
Yeah.
absolute essential set piece for Star Wars, and of course I love it.
Yeah, no, I love it too. And I think it's interesting. It doesn't have the downside of a dash cam when it's facing our heroes from the actual like windshield itself perspective, because you're not seeing the world travel behind it like you would at the rear view mirror.
That's
You're
so
seeing, and so I think that is one thing that really allows you to feel more immersed in that it's actually doing what it's doing, because you're able to just shift things a little bit with the aesthetic of the camera. And when like they're in the asteroid field, it's all bumping around and whatnot. And so you're not limited by even shit shot now looks stupid when it's in a car most
it
of the
can.
time.
Yeah.
And so back then, I mean, like when you watch a Bond movie, anything shot in a car looks ridiculous. And so they really got away with not having to do that by not having rear view mirrors or
No, but
rear windows.
talking about motion happening outside the windows, obviously in the Falcon more than anywhere else, although
Yeah.
not exclusively, we have the design of hyperspace. And I don't know if we can attribute that to the same set designers, but what a fascinating way they decided to make that look. And
Yeah.
and it's just the visual of it is burned on your brain, and now that is the only way you can depict light speed or hyperspeed. Like incredibly good idea, and it is kind of a part of the Falcon aesthetic, especially the cockpit in particular. It's not exclusive to the Falcon, but that's a big part of that's one of the cool things you get to see while you're there, and it definitely contributes to your love of that set piece.
Yeah. No, it is absolutely fantastic part of Star Wars. And the fact that it's not part of the prequels feels weird, but it's great that it's back for the sequels. But also at the same time, like one ship shouldn't be in all of Star Wars, and so it's wonderful.
You're
But
right, but isn't
it
it kind
does feel like right behind you, like it says, "Chewie, we're home," sort of.
I never really thought about that before, but and I agree that maybe it would be silly if it was in all of Star Wars, but considering how much fan service George wanted to involve in those prequels, isn't it interesting that he had
It
had
is
the
in
gall
Revenge of the
not to
Sith.
put it in there? It is in Revenge of the Sith.
I think it's in like a background shot, yeah, and that's why it's canonically inconsistent, because it doesn't look like it does in Solo. It doesn't look pretty. It looks like
Oh,
shit.
yeah,
So
that's fine. Whatever. Not going to get too hung up on that.
it's not like there's only one of them.
Oh, that's true. Oh, that's a good point. Oh, I never thought about that before.
Yeah,
So weird if we
there's only one Falcon, but there's more than one
yeah,
YT 1300
yeah.
freighter.
But now I want to see more, or do I?
Yeah.
I want to see other modded Falcons. What other people have done to their Falcons. Yeah. Okay. Your turn for number 2, please.
Number two would be, and I think there's a chance it will be in your top two, and if not, I'm going to be kind of surprised. Would be the Theed reactor room
Yes, that's
on
my number
Naboo.
two. Yep.
Nice, perfect. We can talk about it then together.
Yep.
And this is, and I'm confident I know your number one then, and it'll fit really well with my number one.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but it'll fit well with my number one. But no, yes, this is an awesome scene piece. This is everything that is so Star Wars. It's raw and it's unbalanced. It's dangerous as hell. It's inconvenient. It's just like Maul. And when you read the novelizations and everything the companies and like the Darth Plagueis novel, Maul intentionally leads them there. He waits for them because he wants to fight them there because he knows if it's 2-on-1, this is the best way to get an easy separation. And
Right.
he gets rid of Obi-Wan for a good amount of time because of this.
Controls the space in there for sure.
Exactly. And because he's able to use just like brute force, and the use of a large pit is so Star Warsy. The fact that you have those the gateways of the force fields, it's so cool. It was the kind of set design that we would just imagine was around us playing with broomsticks in the yards as kids. It was one of the coolest things about the Phantom Menace. And definitely was the coolest set design as a kid, and is just a really Star Warsy and fulfilling scene design in a movie that has some visuals that are a little bit off. This is absolutely not one of them. And as we mentioned before with Oda Gunga, that not one of them either. It's a movie with a lot of pluses and minuses, and this is another one of those amazing pluses. Phantom Menace is a technological masterpiece in a lot of ways, and this is contributing to that as well.
Yeah, I think the key words you just used were as kids, because almost any Star Wars fan of a certain age would consider this among the very best for all the reasons you just listed. But not just because of what happens here, or because of the symbolism of Darth Maul, or the story that's even taking place at this point. Because the set designers can't really be credited with the music that really sells Duel of the Fates, or the fight choreography, which of course helps to make the acrobatics, the victories and the tragedies that happen in this particular sequence. But this generator room, it takes, like you said, the pit is there. This classic Star Wars interior, which is like a cavernous, not unlike the Emperor's throne room, frankly, in Return of the Jedi. This like steel industrial space with this big, daunting chasm. And it just kind of steps up that trope 1,000,000%. And maybe some of this room is green screen. I suspect it probably is, because that started to be implemented in the prequels. I don't care. Like you said, it looks really, really good. The platforms and the sheer size of this space is so big. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say this might be the most rewatchable scene in all of Star Wars, because you can begin it at the beginning. You don't need to see anything before or after. And just like the full 8 minutes of it or whatever is stupendous.
Yeah, it's extremely rewatchable.
Yeah.
It cuts in with yippee and a few other things like, oh, let's try spinning. That's a good trick. But oh my God, Colin, watching the behind the scenes gallery for Mando season 2.
Yeah.
Friggin' Dave Filoni, I lost it. He literally says that, like, I forget what the circumstance is, but they're talking about, I think they're referring to flying as well. And it's just like, he could spin. That's a good trick. And I loved it. Of course, but it's great to hear like prequel memes used by the king of prequel era. Aside from even including almost George Lucas in that respect.
He's smart, because he's playing to his audience, because prequel memes love Dave Filoni.
Yeah, I mean, also rightfully, and it was a hilarious. He and Jon Favreau had a kind of a McClunky conversation as well, which was funny.
What's a McClunky conversation? That means something.
Do you not know what McClunky is?
Maybe.
So McClunky was one of the when George Lucas wanted to do 3D versions and like redo the all the movies and re-release them in the theaters, the original 6. He was going. He re-edited all of the movies again, and there was almost no real adjustments, but they've used these same cuts for the 4K versions put on Disney Plus. And so really one of the only major adjustments that was different, because George Lucas had already, like, he had made a couple edits to the rest of the trilogy, like rest of the movies, even though they weren't released. He only did the 3D version of Phantom Menace. And so at that point, there was just this random line where the last word Greedo says before dying is McClunky.
Okay.
And now that's Greedo's final word. And they use McClunky in the post-credit scene with Boba Fett and Bib Fortuna. I forget where, like, how it's exactly used. I think that's when they use it this season. But initially, they were going to use it as like a one of those. Like, I think Favreau mentioned it as like a, what if Din just like points his gun at someone and says McClunky and just shoots them as like you're dead sort of thing. Like that's what Greedo was going to say to, and Dave Filoni's just like, no, let's not do that.
It's pretty dumb.
It is pretty dumb, but they used it in a really good way. It was kind of a subtle McClunky.
Good. Whose turn is it? Are we done talking about the reactor room, like the generator?
The reactor room, there's not a whole lot else to say. Maybe the force field gates, maybe give them an extra nod. That was phenomenal. And the fact that Maul has those incredible doors to use as his entry point for the entire scene really adds to the over the top aesthetic.
But again, I come back to the practicality that makes these, and I know there probably is some CGI in this sequence, but it's always most memorable and at its best when you can look at it and you can tell that I could put my hands on that. And that's been true of everything we've talked about so far, with the exception maybe of like the ocean on Camino, but like what's inside feels very lived in.
Yeah, absolutely. So number ones, and my guess is mine is going to be a variation of yours. I could be wrong though. Okay. But my number one is actually the Mos Espa Grand Arena.
Okay, nothing to do with mine.
Really? So yours is not Mos Eisley?
No. But that it's definitely an honorable mention of mine because it was
the one that got kicked out of my list at the very end, and I really expected you to have Mos Eisley. But I chose Mos Espa, the Grand Arena, specifically because of, like, yes, we get the pod race that occurs, which is so awesome. But my favorite part is the backstage where you have Qui-Gon negotiating with Watto, and you have Anakin getting his pod ready, and you still have this wretched hive of scum and villainy, and you still have Jabba the Hutt like ringing things in as he worms his way out with Bib Fortuna, and it's everything that's so Star Warsy. And yes, there's a lot of CGI, but we were still raised kind of on the original 6, and I still adore the pod race, and I think there are a ton of really cool background characters. There are some that don't work with CGI, but there are some that are still extremely cool. And the way that entire set is done, I love the racetrack style of it. It's not a fair thing to blame The Last Jedi for the hopes it gave me, except for how the sound and look of a racetrack in Star Wars made me so convinced I was getting a pod race in the middle of The Last Jedi, and then it was a bunch of fathiers, and I was like, no, I was so happy. I had like 3 seconds of incredible elatement, and then it just took it away. Not that movie's fault, but one of those things that I want to see another pod race. And I love the Mos Espa Grand Arena because it's everything from Mos Eisley, but it's not as dark. It's brighter, and it's just it's a little bit more fun, but it's a great callback. It's a more expanded way of the galaxy, and also Qui-Gon and Watto have such a fun rapport that it makes for a bunch of great scenes sequentially, with then the pod race happening as well. And so that took the cake for me, because Tatooine has such a clear place in the way that you view Star Wars and how that fits for you. But there was something specific about the Mos Espa Grand Arena that has just always really stuck with me since I was a little kid.
They took such pains in those times to convey to us that pod racing is like a very ubiquitous thing in the galaxy. And then like you remember how awesome the N64 game was, Star Wars pod racing? That was like one of the best racing games.
It was awesome.
I love that. like Mario Kart level good. And you're right. I love the garage sequence just as much, if not more, than the suspense of the race itself. But then you're right. They just kind of missed a few opportunities to bring it back to us, and they can do that whenever they want. It'll never be out of
Absolutely.
place. Like it can be fit into just about anything, because that's what sports are. They just like fit into the world. But yeah, it's so interesting. I never would have thought you would have selected this as your favorite. I mean, I know that you love the pod race sequence, but
Mm.
this is your favorite set piece ever. More interestingly, the fact that you chose this many prequel sets for your list in general.
This many Phantom Menace sets as well.
Seriously, yeah.
I mean, I also had Attack of the Clones in there as well, but I didn't really view necessarily like creature design as a huge piece. I really did try to view it more as set, and I know inherently we've talked a little bit about creature design throughout this, but I viewed this a little bit more in my rankings as the set design itself, and I just feel it feels so inherently Star Wars, and I can imagine anything happening. Imagine the Mos Esper Grand Arena. Can you picture a crate dragon showing up?
Totally.
Totally. Can you
Yeah.
picture a giant fight with Tusken Raiders? Totally. Can
Yeah.
you picture one of the most badass lightsaber fights ever? Totally. Could you picture another pod race? Totally. Could you picture a speeder coming by? Absolutely. It's just a ubiquitously great Star Wars feel to it.
Okay, you just said something that really like triggered a thought, because I'm always thinking of different ways we can color the backdrop of a great lightsaber duel. I used to think all the time it would be great to see one in the snow, and then we got the Force Awakens. Then I thought it would be really great to see one in the rain, and we got that in the Rise of Skywalker. But I always thought like a rainy beach would be a really cool place to see a lightsaber duel. Something they've never done is a lightsaber duel in front of a crowd. And that, like in a gladiator kind of way, we've done gladiators in Attack of the Clones, but not with lightsabers. And that,
Not against each other.
not against each other. That's what I mean. Like, I mean, like a duel between two people, and people are like uh, cheering them on, or maybe they're watching in horror or something. And that is an interesting prospect.
Yeah, that would be really, really cool.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking of it that way. I was thinking of it more of like an abandoned pod arena. But yeah, absolutely. Have it as a bunch of people around. The Jedi is not intentionally having the crowd there. The Sith maybe intentionally had the crowd there. So
End
the
up.
Jedi has to like monitor what they're doing and has a lot of more collateral damage to watch out for. But you can create a really cool you can create something really interesting. You can create some anarchy when you have a crowd around. And I mean, we haven't had many eras where there's a lot of dueling opportunity. And so it'll be interesting when we get to more of those eras.
My all-time favorite Star Wars set is much more simple than that. It's the Lars Homestead from A New Hope. This
More
is
than fair.
It's not only classic and essential. I think it might be the great design feat of that original Star Wars movie because of its minimalism. Uh, it's one thing to build these elaborate space stations or ships, flashing lights and starry vistas. Um, this is a complete redesign of the desolate living space of the unlikely heroic farm boy. This design uses massive space rather than like putting him in this little hut in the middle of nowhere. He's out on this big open plain to illustrate exactly how small and insular his world is. And there's a complete lack of color here, a lack of life and vibrance. There's no plant life. I think that's perfectly symbolic of Luke having not found his purpose or passion yet. And as soon as he does, he can leave there. And just on the look of this place, I think I love the trenches of their house. I love that he can like look down and Aunt Beru is down there. I like the weird igloo structure that is the house itself.
Love the house.
Obviously, I love the twin suns if you consider that part of the set design. I think this whole set is a blank canvas on which a great adventure begins its first chapter. And obviously, Star Wars gets busier after the Lars Homestead, but it's a beautiful starting point.
Oh, it's a beautiful starting point. And if you include the twin suns, then that's a little unfair. That's a Tatooine feature.
That's a
Then I almost have to agree with you completely and shuffle my whole list around. But it's phenomenal. And I love that Ray goes back there. I don't necessarily love the entirety of that scene, but I love the fact that the Lars homestead is caved in a little bit and that she like kind of sleds down. I think that's a wonderful part of it. And I think that we see it over a long period of time. We see it as Klieg Lars' home, and then down to Owen, and then it being torched and being a place that no one has been to in a long time.
Right.
And it is the start of our journey, and it is this kind of like just carved out area where you have a bunch of Star Wars iconography just being developed before our very eyes. Just the way that whether it's the blue milk or the doors, the doorways, the tapestry on the ceiling, there's so many different things.
Yeah, it's really, really special. And similarly, something that made my
Evaporators.
my honorable mentions list is Shmi Skywalker's house, because it's kind of like the same thing, but it's in the city, and they did a good job of like making it seem like she lives like in kind of maybe assisted living housing or something. But they're built of what I was talking about earlier, this like crude organic cement or whatever, and it's maybe even a little,
Stucco-ish.
yeah, kind of. It's maybe even like a little bit more architecturally complex than Luke's first home, is Anakin's first home, and I think that's a cool place. And obviously,
Yeah.
the cantina, a lot of Tatooine stuff is either on my list or just misses the cut because Tatooine's great.
Yeah, and the Mos Eisley Cantina is a phenomenal one. I think the creatures play such a huge role there that I felt it was a little hard to say the set itself was the specific reason.
I thought
And
the same.
that
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm glad you felt that
Crowd
same
and the
way.
music. It's those are not really the set, you know.
Yeah. Let's see what else I had here.
Cloud City,
w-
in particular, like the dining room when Vader appears, I think that's a really cool moment. And
uh,
basically,
I was good.
Cloud City.
Yeah, I was gonna say the carbon area downstairs and the hallways, like the light up hallways.
Yeah.
Those are really cool. I think those are great set design. Jabba's Palace,
We've
another
talked a lot.
phenomenal set.
You're right.
Talked about that a lot. Yeah.
Yep.
And the other couple I have here would be a little bit more obscure ones and the honorable mentions. Ray's home, the AT-AT. I think that's a really fantastic
You're
scene.
so right. It's so brief, and I don't mean to
Yeah.
say forgettable because it's not, but like they move on so quickly from it that I didn't consider it. And you're right. What a genius choice that was.
I absolutely love everything about that. Where she plunks on the helmet, her little kitchen, her like her bedroom area. It's a really cool choice. Another one from a couple more from the Last Jedi would be Temple Island. So that would be the part on Octo. The island itself, everything about it is super cool. I really quite like that. And Snoke's throne room, not as good as maybe Palpatine's, but great in its even more over the top presentation that it has.
Yeah.
It's very cool. And then a couple ones from the non Skywalker saga would be the Scarif Citadel. That's phenomenal as well. That's a really cool set design. The Planet of Scarif is also cool too. From Mando, I thought the city of Caladan was really great. In particular, the magistrates' quarters area, how it was very kind of Kurosawa style. I thought that was really great. Citadel Station, in particular, and that's part of the Clone Wars, and so that's like this giant like prison structure on kind of a lava-ish planet, and it's basically just this incredibly high security prison, and it's a very cool arc. One of my favorites from the Clone Wars.
Any Imperial Death Star adjacent control bridge, like that's a really cool set. Like, and
yeah,
it's kind of using a lot of the same fixtures that exist elsewhere, but like really important to any Star Wars movie is where the bad guys in suits are hanging out, right?
definitely. And I mean, like even the cafeteria.
Yeah, right.
But and then the only other two here I would have been the World Between Worlds. That's a really cool, very out there Rebels set design that they have. That's quite interesting. And then also Yoda's observational pad on Kashyyyk.
Oh, cool.
That is a really cool kind of set piece.
Nice. All right, so I guess we can move on to the news. We'd love to hear anybody else's ideas. If we forgot like a really big one, please do let us know, because obviously like there's so much great design in the visuals of Star Wars. That's one of the things you love first, and so we'd love to hear other people's lists. What's going on in the world of Star Wars?
Not a ton. There's going to be a Skywalker kind of biography. It's called Skywalker: A Family at War. And so it'll focus on, at the very least, Anakin, Luke, and Leia, because they're on the cover, or Vader, Luke, and Leia are. But it may also, I guess, in that circumstance, talk about Shmi, Padme, Ben, and or Rey as well. So that would make sense. And so that's kind of a cool approach and a way of telling a story from a biographic standpoint as like war heroes and war villains. So that'll be interesting. I'll be curious to know if that's how that story is told, or if it's like how it presents information in a new way, maybe.
Right, right. I mean, the Skywalker saga itself is kind of biographical, so like they would need to
Yeah.
find a new perspective, or just maybe tell the same story but with different colors.
Yeah, I think it would be maybe like a bit of a perspective shift of some sorts to be able to provide a compelling tale.
I read
Um,
that the essential Skywalker Lego video game that's coming out is going to have 300 playable characters,
yep.
including Babu Frick.
Babu Frick. Oh, hey, Babu. Yaddle, I believe, is also one of them as well.
I mean, I guess if
So
you're going to have
obscure
300
as it
playable,
gets.
if you're going to have 300 playable characters, it might as well include Babu Frick.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, 300 characters. That is a lot
The
of
big,
Star Wars characters.
yeah,
So that's going to include your favorite character, pretty much no matter what it is,
yeah.
no matter who your favorite character is. If your favorite character is K2SO, though, and you're hoping to see him in Andor, you're not going to in the first season.
Yeah, I know.
And that's a few question marks. So Tony Gilroy was brought in once again for this project to fix it, the way that he was brought in to fix Rogue One. And as a result of that, K2SO is no longer in the first season. However, we also don't know if there's necessarily going to be more than one season. And I don't know if Alan Tudyk does either, because he didn't really seem to know a whole lot. He says, they're shooting it right now. I'm not in it, but if it stays on the air, stories keep getting told, I'll end up in there. I'm going to be in the show. It's just that the story that Tony is telling doesn't involve K2SO until later on. Can't be too specific, but I can definitely say that I'm not going to be in the first season.
Unless he's lying, which is, I mean, he might be good at this. He's worked in nerd culture things for a long time.
Yeah, but I don't think so in this case. I think that there is. I don't think that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do it that way. I don't think. I don't. If that's like that's no one is going like you. They already announced that he was going to be in the show.
Right.
Like you don't say he's going to be in the show and then say he's not in the show, and then put him in the show. Then you're literally just lying to fans. That would be like saying it would be like if Ewan McGregor says, "No, I'm not in Obi-Wan." What do you mean? You literally were announced and said you were in Obi-Wan.
Yeah, but I mean, he isn't saying that he's not going to be in the show. He just thinks it'll probably come in a roundabout way.
Yeah, but it's something that we have also heard nowhere else that there would be more than one season.
We heard
So,
nothing about the show at all.
well, we've heard some things, and we heard that it was going to be 12 episodes. So that was like maybe it is going to be 6 episodes and then another 6 episodes. Maybe it's going to be 2 seasons. That would be a totally big surprise,
Yeah.
but could maybe make sense. Or maybe it's going to be 12 episodes and season 2 will be 12 episodes and it's going to be 24 episodes in total. It's just the way it's been presented has not been so. And the way it was presented was that they had a kind of a clear story they were going to be telling, and it was going to be wrapped up in one. And K2SO was going to be involved, and now he's not involved. And so it wouldn't surprise me if the story itself is different, and that we know how K2SO will come into Cassian's life, but that just may not be the story that's being told, because that was told in a comic. And
Right.
maybe they decide they don't want to interpret that comic in any way. Maybe Disney is like, no, you got to stick at least semi to the comic so that we don't piss off people. You have to like use some framework of it, the same way we used like the framework of Cobb Vanth. And maybe Tony Gilroy was like, okay, then don't give me the robot, because he also doesn't care about Star Wars either. So it's something that is interesting, but it also tells me a little bit more about what the tone could be, and that you're not going to have K2 because it'll be maybe a little bit more serious.
Yeah, maybe so. All right, what else?
Only other thing would be Mando season 2 was nominated or was said for AFI top 10 TV shows of 2020. And Pedro Pascal has also recently talked about some of the timelines of the show. He says, I am told what's happening, what the plan is, but I can't share it. There's expansions of this world where there are so many unexpected surprises and timelines that are going to be dealt with. If the character were to cross over into these worlds, it will be utilized in a way that's meant to be expected, that isn't meant to be expected. I wouldn't want to spoil the surprise of whether or not characters from the show were already known to be going to be crossing over. And so basically he's just saying, he's referring to the crossover events that will be occurring and the fact that maybe multiple timelines could occur. Some people are interpreting this as that there's going to be a time jump, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that that's taking a leap. I think that that means that there could be a lot of flashbacks in the next season of Mando, that there could be a different timeline in Ahsoka, and maybe she met a younger Din or something like that, or some other things like who knows. But my guess, I saw somewhere that there was a clickbait title of somebody had an article, which is like Mando season 3 time jump, and they were referencing from this quote because he says unexpected surprises and timelines. And I'm thinking, like, seriously, he's talking about crossover events, and you decided that meant that there was going to be a time jump in season 3 of Mando. And so maybe there is, but also we did leave on a ridiculous cliffhanger. So my guess is there won't be, but there could be time jumps in the Filoni Favreau-verse, which includes Mando season 3. And so that would be the way I would interpret that.
I really think the Filoni Favreau-verse should include a series all about the culture of the Minox.
Oh man, that was a bummer. That was pissing me off. Sorry about interrupting you on that one, though.
You got there. You got to it in the end, and now I'll never forget. Yes, I will. And tomorrow I will not remember what they're called anymore.
No, I've been doing some deep cut studying, and so I guess I got to make sure I don't forget the easy ones.
That's what I was trying to put you to the test. I was trying.
No, I know, and that's why it was like such a bad one. But I definitely know that I can't. It's crazy. I drink one glass of wine. Some people can work while they do that stuff. Nah, I can't. I'm done.
I hear you. All right. Well, I want to wish a couple of happy birthdays. Today, recording day. So yesterday, if this is coming out on Wednesday, happy birthday on January 26th to Mercedes Varnado, aka Sasha Banks. She's Casca Reeves. This is her first happy birthday on Recorder 66. Also, happy birthday next Wednesday, February 3rd, to Warwick Davis.
Nice.
So obviously he's a staple. He's been back in. Was he in The Mandalorian at any point?
I don't believe so, but he's been in so many things.
He's been around a bunch, right?
Yeah, he's been in almost all of them. He was in Rise of Skywalker in a couple roles and all the other things.
And Solo, he was in Solo.
Yeah, he was Solo. Couple roles in Solo.
We would love for you to send us your lists of your favorite scene pieces, set pieces in Star Wars. You can email us anytime about anything at all at recorder66podcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet at recorder66. As always, please rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And until we are together again,
may the Force be with you.